visions into reality. For more information, visit our website www.
Faster, fresher, and better than before. We've given our app a makeover. The new Vision Digital Experience is now the Vision Digital Experience. The future of media is here and it's looking bright. Check out the Vision Digital Experience app to have a feel of the fresh look, faster speed and exciting new TV and radio channels and so much more. Download the app on App Store or Google Play Store now. Vision Digital Experience, the future of media.
We license, we regulate and supervise all schemes in this country that save members' funds for retirement. We also regulate and supervise the service providers that play in this space to provide the professional expertise. All schemes in this market are first registered with us in order to play in the space. That is one entry point, and subsequently they meet all the regulatory requirements for licensing. They need to have a trust deed which is reviewed by us to ensure that it provides the protection to members, not to the sponsor or the employer, and to ensure that all funds shall be invested well and all the necessary details in terms of members' data and how they will join and exit are taken care of. The second point is to ensure that all service providers that play in the space are also registered and licensed. They meet the minimum requirements in order to support the investment of those funds. When a scheme is established, the trustees are also licensed by us to ensure that they're fit and proper in order to serve you as members. And their roles are quite enormous. They have a huge mandate. They have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that they appoint the service providers I mentioned of, and to ensure that they execute their work and also submit all the documentation as provided for
Yep. Hello. Yes, it's working. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this panel. The IT team just help us. I feel like we're getting a bit of feedback as we settle into this last session for the day. So this panel is going to focus on trade disruptions and strategies for navigating regional barriers. And it's going to be hosted by AB and David in association with KCB Bank Uganda. Your moderators for the session will be myself, Judy Wambaire, from KCB Bank Uganda Limited, and my co-moderator is Susan Ariao, an associate at AB and David Advocates. We're going to receive a keynote address on this very topic from Mr. David Ofusu-Doti. Mr. David Ofusu-Doti, kindly confirm that you can hear us.
I can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Welcome, David. I'll just briefly introduce you. I know you're part of the panel. We'll take longer discussions at that level. David Ofusu-Doti is the founder and senior partner of AB and David Africa, a Pan-African business law firm with offices in Ghana, Zambia, Uganda, Zimbabwe, and Kenya. You're most welcome, David, and please take on the discussion.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so let me share my screen.
As we wait for David to share his screen, members, dignitaries, I request that we occupy the seats that are in front of us. I think we are too scattered all over. It would be better if we had most of us move a bit forward. We have a lot of empty seats that we could occupy.
Okay, Madam Moderator, my screen being shared, if you can see it.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Should I proceed?
Please do.
Okay, I will try and skip a few slides. I was originally supposed to do this in 30 minutes, but we are far behind schedule, and both myself and Richard, who is online, may have to drop out at some point. So we are discussing disruptions in trade and strategies for navigating barriers. The context of this presentation is going to deal just with the disruptions and the causes for the disruptions, because how to overcome the main barriers will be the focus of the discussion in the main session when the panel starts. Now, essentially, the trend over the last 3 to 4 years, starting particularly with COVID-19, leading to serious disruptions in supply chains and manufacturing in particular, has led to the situation where the disruptions caused by COVID-19 have lasted up to a significant period, and trade realignments appear to be emerging both as a result of COVID-19 and matters that have also occurred since. So significantly, you notice that Russia-Ukraine war has also led to the situation where export of food from Asia, from Europe to Africa and to other parts of the world have been affected in one way or the other, where countries like India temporarily suspended the export of rice and other similar activities, and the export of wheat has been affected as well. Now, in the midst of this, also, a few other things have happened which are disruptive in nature. One of them is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, which brings 19 countries together, incidentally, including Japan and China in one place, and stimulating trade in the eastern part of the world. And these coincide with the AFCFTA, which I'll talk about a bit more. And then incidentally, also with the Congo DR joining the East Africa Economic Community. So these are some of the disruptive trends that has been observed. Along the same line, you will find that in 2023, the Africa Union has declared it as the year for accelerating the implementation of the AFCFTA. But it is within that same period that the question as to whether China remains a world factory has become a very big issue, because China's recovery following the lifting of the border closures after China lifted its zero tolerance for COVID-19, as the growth has not picked up as fast as was expected. However, blocs like SADC, COMESA, and the rest have been trying to accelerate their own way of implementing Agenda 2063, which is the larger agenda of the AU. Then you take a look across West Africa and you find a series of coups which have happened over the period: Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea, and lately Niger, leading to border closures in the region and a threat of an invasion, as it were, from Niger. So again, these are affecting trade. For example, Niger is a lot of people talk about uranium, but it's quite a major exporter of onions. And a few West African countries are already experiencing shortage of onions as a result of border closures following the coup in Niger. Now, as I indicated, I was going to talk a bit more about AFCFTA to set the context for the discussion. And AFCFTA actually is coming from the fact that until the partition of Africa, it was just one continent. After the partition and the post-colonial era, a lot of regional blocs have emerged, some crisscrossing each other. So from SADC all the way to UMA in the north, and from IGAD all the way to MOA in the west, you find about 14 regional blocs. If AFCFTA is actually fully implemented, the idea is to see what you see on the right side of your screen, which is a future where all countries, even though remaining countries individual, are trading in a seamless manner across borders. Essentially, and we all know much about this, so I will skip a lot of the things, leading to a larger market and tariff-free, duty-free exports. And these, in many ways, are going to impact on other aspects of business in Africa. There are three key areas which I think should be of concern to audience of this nature. One is the trade in goods, where there are a lot of schedules, including the schedules on tariff concessions, rules of origin, which about 90% of it has been completed. Significantly, I think automotive and textiles are still outstanding. Cooperation on customs, etc., etc. And then you have trade in services, which affects lawyers, as well as people in the finance sector. And I'm mentioning those two sectors because KCB and AB and David Africa are co-hosting this session. And we are all in the services sector. And this initial phase one services sector seeking to be liberalized includes finance, professional services, which includes law, tourism, the construction sector, and then transportation and tourism. So the liberalization under the AFCFTA does affect the services sector. And then, of course, procedures on dispute resolution, which definitely is where a lot of lawyers apply their trade. Now, the other protocols that will flow from it includes the one on competition policy. Tula Kera is on this call. He talked a lot about competition. The protocol on investments and one on intellectual property. And then it's expected that you will have 90% of the goods fully liberalized, 13%, 3% excluded, and 7% sensitive. Again, during the panel, we can go into those things. I want to really speed this up. Opportunities under it are enormous. Expected manufacturing boost, which to some extent from what we observe has already started, especially light manufacturing and increasing in value addition, especially in the agri sector. Access to new markets for SMEs, jobs for youth and women. And very often when people talk about the AFCFTA, they refer to a $3.4 trillion market. I prefer to talk about the purchase power parity, which is a better way to measure the size of a market. And that is 6.6 trillion. That's Africa's purchase power parity market. That's against the GDP of 3.4, which is the much talked about one. The liberalization will also straddle across what is called the LDC, non-LDC, and G6 countries, and which gives a timeline within which countries in these three categories can liberalize. Again, during the discussion time, if there are questions relating to this, we can discuss that. But these have got disruptive impact in the sense that you have three categories of countries within one continent who are liberalizing at staggered periods over the trade area. But what then are the other noticeable trade disruptive trends of the AFCFTA as we view it, particularly at AB and David Africa? One is liberalization generally. A lot of liberalization is going on across the continent. The other is globalization, which has not reversed, notwithstanding COVID. Globalization is still ongoing, especially where countries continue to fight for foreign direct investment. But the other trend less talked about is what I call Africanization, where increasingly Africans are actually beginning to assert themselves in various ways which affect trade. Two things are of significance. One is the increasing consumption of African food, which is leading to a trend where urban consumption is beginning to look at local food or staple foods which are beginning to get packaged in an urbanized manner and being involved in mass distribution, and people are ordering things online. The other one has to do with clothing, where there is an increasing demand for African wear, especially urban apparel. Then there is a general increase in integration across Africa. There are emerging policies in specific countries. Egypt, for example, is a country where quite a lot of AFCFTA-related policies are being rolled out. Then under the protocol, there is the requirement for every country to create what is called the Boosting Intra-Africa Trade Treaty on its own. Gabon, for example, is one country which is actually doing well in that regard. Then you have the regional blocs continue to come up with policies as well. The EAC is doing that. ECOWAS, for example, is doing the ECOWAS Trade Liberalization, or ETLS. I've already talked about coups in West Africa. But the other trend also is an increasing in relaxation of movements among Africans, realization of visas in many countries. Kenya, for example, is noted for being bullish about that, which is leading to a drive in tourism. Rwanda is one country which is also highly liberalized movement across. Hopefully, the free movement protocol will see fruition, and it may further impact on trade. But areas that lawyers in particular may also observe a lot of disruption include emergence of practice areas in trade remedies in Africa, cutting across dumping and anti-dumping measures, regulatory advice to businesses that lawyers represent, and representation of governments, because the dispute resolution protocol is based on a government to government, and most governments don't have expertise in trade agreements. So I expect a lot of fair amount of increase in services in this sector. Intellectual property matters relating to trade, supporting companies in negotiations prior to the dispute resolution before it gets to the point of state-to-state dispute resolution, increase in trade in goods across the continent as well as trade in services. And then I expect quite a lot of FDIs which are looking at cross-border investments, in other words, investing in multiple countries. And this is already an emerging trend. That will definitely then lead to cross-border dispute resolution and cross-border taxation advice that lawyers may get involved in. Export trade definitely has a legal impact. Then you have the situation where big tech is another trend that we have to observe. And that has already happened as a result of the advent of AI, which seems to be booming in one way or the other. That will affect digital trade. The good thing is that under the AFCFTA, the digital trade protocol is currently far advanced in terms of negotiations. And it is expected that the digital trade protocol will be out by next year. And again, the impact of AI and all the entire ecosystem of the digital economy is going to be one of the areas that lawyers, legal services will be affected. Fintech will have a boost, and then it means that the nature of advice we give to clients are likely to be based on issues that are then affected in one way or the other by all these emerging trends. And then, of course, it will have a backlog impact on banking, insurance, M&A, etc., to say a few. Lawyers would therefore need to be looking at their own digital infrastructure. I expect massive legislative reforms as part of the things that will be affecting trade. Changes in technical skills. I've already talked about new FDIs becoming multiple jurisdiction-based FDIs, international disputes, etc. And then not to forget that there's likely to be law firm expansion or law firm networks and collaboration across borders. These are all part of the disruptive impact that is emerging as a result of trade. Then there will be collateral opportunities in other sectors. For example, increase in movement will mean increase in transport and connectivity across borders. The expectation of increase in value addition will mean increase in power projects. Value addition will mean increase in manufacturing, and tourism is also expected, which I've talked about already. Other trends that have already emerged include, for example, feeding the people is definitely going to be an area to watch for businesses, both in the finance and in the legal sector. The amount of import of urban food alone is trending from $35 billion to about $110 billion expected, $150 billion expected to hit by 2030. And that's a significant trend that will mean that lawyers who advise clients in fast-moving consumer goods are going to get busy in such areas, just to indicate a few of some of the ways that trade will impact. Or if you take movement of goods with the resurgence of movement after the end of COVID, it is likely to trend back to the original projection from 80 billion to about 200 billion in terms of movement of goods across borders in Africa. And I talked about clothing already. Currently, the continent is 1.4 billion people, expected to hit 1.6 billion by 2030. And that's the amount of people to clothe. Manufacturing is expected to hit $1 trillion. And those are some of the indicative figures this slide in particular is showing. So these are some of the indicative things that are disrupting trade on the continent. And I thought I should share this at the background before the moderator takes over and let us go into the general discussion itself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Members, please join me to thank him for that articulate presentation, which lays a very good background for the discussion that we are just about to delve into with our panelists. We also request, David, if it's possible, if you could share with us that particular paper, very useful insights that we can share with members. We request that you consider that. I will now invite
I will do that. I will share it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll invite my co-moderator, Susan, to just introduce very briefly our panelists as we go into that discussion.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I welcome you to this panel session. As introduced, my name is Susan Ariao. I'm an associate at AB and David Advocates, Uganda, and I have the honor of introducing this panel. I'll start with our panel that is present here at the moment. Right across me on my left is Miss Meg Hilbert Jackie. I hope I haven't butchered your name. So Meg is the managing director of Jacana Foods Limited, which is a company that is here in Uganda. Meg is also the president of the American Chamber of Commerce in Uganda. You're welcome, Meg. And then just right next to Meg is Dr. Henry Honoria. Dr. Honoria is the knowledge partner and legal consultant at ALP Advocates. He holds a doctorate in philosophy from the University of Cambridge. You're most welcome, Doctor.
Thank you.
I'll now introduce our panelists who are joining us online. We have David Ofosudote, who is the founding partner of the law firm that I am pleased to call my home. That's where I work as an associate. He is our founder and senior partner at AB and David Advocates Africa, a Pan-African business law firm with offices in Ghana, Zambia, here in Uganda, Zimbabwe, and Kenya. Once again, you're most welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And then we also have on our panel Dr. Richard Adu Jamfi. He is currently a senior research and technical advisor at the Afro Champions Initiative, which is an African public-private platform that promotes the growth and expansion of SMEs. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
So we move straight into the discussions. We will begin with you, David.
Aria, there is Tula Kera on the line as well, the panel. More the panel.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yes, apologies about that. We do have Thula Kaira, is the consultant and head competition, government business and regulation at AB and David Zambia, and a former advisor on competition law and policy, COMESA. You're most welcome, sir.
Okay, so right into the discussions. David, you are a big proponent of the blue ocean opportunities for African businesses. What does this mean?
I think blue ocean is a strategy process that essentially focuses on seeking to enter into areas which there isn't much competition. And the reason I talk about blue ocean a lot when it comes to Africa is that unlike other parts of the world where there are very mature markets, a significant part of African markets are not yet matured. And therefore, there are quite a lot of things that have not been done before and quite a lot of unoccupied spaces. So for any business seeking to strategize across Africa, you are better off looking for blue ocean opportunities rather than red ocean opportunities, where there's a dog eat dog approach and it's a bloody area. That's what blue ocean is about. And just to cite a couple of examples, some of which set the context in my presentation, if you were to take any typical area in Europe and you walk across the street, you find a lot of fast food joints, the likes of KFC, McDonald's, etc. But if you were to come across Africa and you went to Nigeria, for example, and you were looking for Momoy or Eba or Matoke in Kenya or in Chima in Zambia, you are not likely to find the same amount of fast foods. But these are the things we eat at home. And therefore, that is clearly a blue ocean opportunity for people to tap into. Or again, if you go back to the presentation I made and you talk about 1.4 billion people trending to 1.6 billion people who are likely to be clothed, and you see that we also have an Africanization trend in terms of where Africa is a clear opportunity, and therefore, why would you want to compete about manufacture of suits as against African wear? These are just a couple of examples of how you can identify blue ocean opportunities for businesses, and that's a disruptive way of looking at trade across Africa.
Okay. Thank you, David. But still with you, how does this blue ocean opportunities help overcome the challenges for African businesses amidst the global disruptions that we are facing at the moment?
It does. I mean, it creates the chance for people to look at things which have not been done before, and especially for the SME sector. There are quite a lot of things that you can do that previously are not being done. That's the point I was trying to emphasize. So in my first answer to the question, I emphasize the how. And I want to keep it short here because Richard will need to leave any moment from now. And he had cautioned that about that area. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, David. Over to you, Judy.
All right. Thank you, Susan. I'll go straight to David. So, David, what do you view as the key items to deal in while navigating the existing trade barriers limiting intra-African
I'm
trade?
sure you're referring to Richard, not David.
Richard, yes. I'm addressing Richard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I think I got the snap of it. I'm sorry that I will just have to leave, but I'll try to make it snappy because I do know this is promising to be an interesting discussion. Basically, I would say on the three levels, one on the macro, meso, and then the micro. I would start with the macro. I would say, on one hand, our sense of nationalism, it's itself a barrier, I should say, towards having regional integration. David mentioned from his presentation on one of the slides, page 5, as I observed, that before Africa was divided into many segments, there was just one, more or less one country or one continent. And because of the 19th century division that occurred afterwards, we have grown into this sense of nationalism that if Ghana is trading with Burkina Faso because Burkina Faso is producing tomatoes, then it becomes even a problem because Ghana is thinking, why can't it produce tomatoes but buy from Burkina Faso? Or why is Nigeria blocking, for instance, Benin from bringing in goods to Nigeria? Or nowadays, why is it that Nigeria is stopping electricity going to Niger, so to say? So, and on the one hand, it's basically to do with this sense of nationalism, which tend to make us forget that unique identity that we have. So that itself is a trade barrier, such that even the regional economic bodies, in many ways, are unable to implement their own, so to say, outcomes or results which you would like to see in different countries. Countries are more or less the sovereign entities that are preventing regional bodies themselves to come up with ideas or to come up with solutions to problems that we have. The African Union cannot negotiate any deal on behalf of Africa. No, it's not possible. It has to be the country, or it probably has to be on another level, the regional economic body. So this is itself a problem which we are facing, one of the existing challenges. The other is, if you come down to the meso, at the institutional level, where there are a lot of non-tariff barriers, that is, all those barriers that are causing trade not to happen, except for, say, export or import duties. This is a lot. It could be infrastructure, it could be just paperwork, or it could be slow procedure or delays in procedures. And these are happening in many cases along the borders that we have. Yeah, so our institutions, on the one hand, I do not blame so much. They do a lot of good work, but at the same time, they also prevent trade from happening or going smoothly. So that is also one of the key aspects that one could find, that at the border, you could delay for how many days? You could delay for as long as it could be before your goods finally gets to where it is. And if these goods are perishable goods, then you understand what I mean. So that is, on the other hand, the challenge that we also face. And then at the micro, which would be the firm level, there is a lot of, I should say, inadequate or lack of information among most of our businesses, where to find markets, how to innovate, and how to bring their products from one point to the other. These are all part of the challenges which we are facing. So all these add up and it makes trade very complicated on our continent. But thankfully, these challenges are not mere challenges that cannot be overcome. The AFCFTA seem to point to a fine direction, where, for instance, there is an opportunity for a company in Ghana to export to Kenya, and we have seen that in the so-called AFCFTA trade initiative, where Ghana and Kenya actually began to see how we can trade across borders. So these are some of the emerging tips, which I think that if it is followed and then according to the letter of the law, we would see changes coming. That if I'm in Ghana or in Zambia or anywhere else, I should be able to export or do business with Egypt with ease. We have seen that coming, and I think it is one of the fine strategies which we have. But one last thing which I think might be interesting even for lawyers is the fact that the rules of origin that have emerged, which looks at how businesses or if I to simplify it, if I trade from Ghana once again to Kenya, how I would be able to benefit for the fact that I am trading with an African country than if it were, say, coming from Europe. Yeah, these are technical stuff which in many cases small businesses are not aware of how to interpret them. So here I think business lawyers have a very big role to play here to assist in understanding the rules of origin, because in many ways our SMEs have that problem of understanding the information which are available and how they can use it. Okay, so Judy, I'll give it back to you and then have to run, but thanks for allowing me the time to talk a bit about trade disruptions and opportunities available. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, David. Delegates, please allow me. Join me to thank the two gentlemen who provided us quite useful insights on this topic. As they drop out, I think we'll now focus we'll change our focus to the physical panelists who are here with us, and I think I'll go straight.
Yeah, thank you. But remember, Mr. Kaira is still online. He is going to be with you for the rest of the session. Yeah. So.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daktari, back to you. So there appears to be emerging trade realignments in the world. So how are these disrupting the existing patterns from where you sit?
Sorry. Thank you. I think David mentioned some of these. These have mostly been in the past 2-3 years, COVID and our war in Ukraine and Russia. But there are other small things that continue to, how would I say, be annoying within the context of trade. Again, David gave us a good background that most times when we talk about trade, we are talking about primarily three things: trade in goods, trade in services, but also you have the free movement of capital, which is more the investment. There are what sometimes they call the poor cousins of these three: capital, services, and goods. That's establishment, movement, and labor. So each time you move to invest, you begin thinking, do I set up in that country? Sometimes you think, who do I recruit? In terms, do I take some people with me? And then do I recruit people from the locality? But then ultimately you need to find market for what you are doing. If you are investing to produce goods, you need to find a market. If you are into services, then you need also to find a market for them. Now the question is, how do you move them freely? Now, the events of the past 2-3 years have made people to think, how do we deal with the free movement of these services? Much of it is done by partner states, say, let's say in East Africa, by making sure that the regulatory framework is conducive. But of course, the reality is that sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes the regulatory framework will be there, but the administrative measures make it very difficult to actually move these services, goods, and capital. But also, let me just talk to East Africa, where some of us come from. And then I'll also talk about African Continental Free Trade Area. David has already mentioned that I think we're about 1.4 billion now in Africa. That would probably put us at about 18 to 19% of the world population of about 8 billion. So you can see it's a huge continent in terms of population. Now, when you come down to East Africa, with the addition of DRC, we're about 300 million plus people, which basically means that we have about 20 to 22% of the African population in the ESC. Now, if you break that down further and look at the age brackets, you'll find that the largest portion of that 300 million people is young and in urban centers. So just think of the market potential for goods and services. They're not living in rural areas, they're mostly in urban centers. Now, of course, DRC's entrance has its own issues. First of all, we're introducing an extra partner state with a different language. It's not that we didn't have Burundi and Rwanda, but Rwanda, if you are looking at Rwanda, if you look at their laws, they're usually in 3 columns. So you have any English, Kinyarwanda, and French. So you can easily understand what the law is about, the regulatory framework is about. Burundi, not so much. It's almost in French. I'm sort of imagine DRC is coming. So now, if you are trying to navigate, we're already trying to navigate through East Africa and the other 6 partner states. Add South Sudan, where the regulatory framework is sometimes unclear. The recent dispute over the grain getting into South Sudan. I tried to go into the website of the South Sudan National Bureau of Standards. There's virtually nothing. They claim they were using regulations to ban the imports, but there's none on the website. Now, the good thing is that a good number of the partner states have tried to make sure that these laws and the regulations are easily available. So people understand that if you are going to do trade, this is the regulatory framework. If you are someone who is dealing in, say, dairy products, I know that's also been a big issue for Uganda and Kenya. You will go and look at the Kenyan law, because if you're moving the products into Kenya, you need to understand the law. If you're moving the same dairy products into Tanzania, you need to know what you are required to. So each market will have those. Now, one of the things that COVID, and this is especially COVID has taught us, is how can we leverage technology. I came in when the plenary was on the leveraging information technology. Now, one of the things that has happened is that you can actually move things. You can do everything on a digital platform. I know there's been a talk about digital services. In Uganda, we passed the amendment to the Income Tax Act recently. And I always got amused how the parliamentarians seemed even not to understand what they were talking about. They were thinking of Facebook, they were thinking of that all these people are bringing their services. I'm reminded Facebook is still off. But they're forgetting that there's greater services that can come through the digital framework. And what Uganda is coming to the table a bit 2-3 years late is to realize that you can actually tax revenue coming from those applications that you download from another country. Now, just to show you how it works, in Tanzania, if you export digital services, downloadable content, all that you need to do is register for VAT online. Once you've registered online, they are what they call proxies. I'm sure eventually the minister has to define for us in the regulations to the amended provisions of the Act. The proxies are usually three things. One, do you have a mobile phone, mobile SIM card? Is the SIM card registered 255? That means the consumer is Tanzanian. Can you locate it by postal address? Who is it being served by postal address? If it's a business registered in Tanzania and located in a particular address, you have identified the supplier, the consumer. Now, once those services have been consumed, every month you are supposed to account for VAT. Again, you don't have to physically go to Tanzania to pay. There's an account provided by the commissioner for tax. You just go on, log on and pay. You don't even have to look for US dollars. You pay by Tanzanian shillings. And you're doing this at the comfort of your home. You're the digital service supplier. So there are opportunities that we can leverage, and that spreads across Africa. I know there are teething problems. Again, I think Richard mentioned the initiative that has been flagged off under the African Continental Free Trade Area, and for Kenya, it's been involved Kenya. One of the entrants has been Kenya and Ghana. I can tell you one of the things that happened, that there's a lady who tried to export, actually she exported goods to Ghana, and it took 3 months. So those are the teething problems that they're still trying to work out the chinks in the system. There's supposed to be an African payment system. So there's opportunities that, in spite of the disruptions, the technological advancements, people have begun to think out of the box. We'll always have the problems that arise. But I think for us lawyers, for a long time, I think we've tended to think inwardly. I always look at lawyers and I think, they're thinking their bread and butter is in banking law, making sure that they have a bank as a retainer client and all that. Why are you thinking banking law within Uganda? Why are you not trying to get the bank to move out to the region? So like now DRC is open for business. What are you doing in your law firm to encourage that bank, to encourage the client you have as producing goods to move into that market? Now that requires you as a lawyer, that requires you as a lawyer to understand what laws are the other side for you to be able to convince your client to move there. There are opportunities there. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Before you leave that point, I think we cannot leave that point without you speaking about DRC and its entry into the EAC. What are the 2 key disruptions that this has caused, or you think this will cause to business? Just in under 1 minute, please.
First, language, because it means that you now need to acquaint yourself with the language, but that shouldn't be a big problem. you can always have interpreters, you can have people who can work with you. The other one is infrastructure. DRC, we know, is not really very conducive for especially if you're doing goods. I know we're trying to do roads in Western DRC, but you see this is a country with a huge country. I think it's now the largest country in Africa, but much of it, the infrastructure is not that sufficient. So you have to navigate. How do you get your goods there? Chances that might have to be by air to get it, and that will be costly. So now you have to factor that in for purpose of getting those goods there. Services might be easier to navigate because most services now, especially those of a digital nature, you just need to make sure that you do that. But also, you need to understand, finally, the regulatory framework. What's the regulatory framework in the DRC? Now, that can be helped, and this is what I want to tell lawyers. Often we think we need to do everything when we go to another country. But one of the things we have learned, the example that the AB and Davids has done with a presence in 6 countries? ALP, we are now in 4 countries. And these are homegrown African law firms, started by Africans. If we can have presence in those countries, you have a firm, then any work that where a client wants to move to that country, you just flag it off to the other country and they take it up there with the legal framework and all that. So now DRC means we need to begin collaborating with lawyers in the DRC. Don't think that every time, everything you must be able to do it. I can tell you, just to conclude, I can tell you an example of what a businessman in Rwanda told me. That it took him 6 hours to set up in Rwanda. The Rwanda Development Board is so fantastic. You can go there and within 6 hours, your business is up and running, every license and all the things. Now, when he tried to do the same, to go to take the same business to Kenya, it took him 3 years to get a license. Now, in the foresight, he said, why didn't I just get a partner in Kenya, someone who was already established and we set up that business by collaboration? So those are the kind of thinking that you need to, a way of navigating, that even when your client has work, don't think, I need to be the one who flies to Nairobi and handles the work. You can get a law firm that you can collaborate with.
Through collaboration. Thank you so much.
Okay, so moving on to you, Meg. So the USA continues to be one of the strongest trading partners Uganda has. However, the passing of the Anti-Homosexuality Act of 2023 seems to be in the way of trade relations between these 2 countries. So we've seen the World Bank coming in to issue statements reconsidering their support for all projects in Uganda. So in 5 minutes, briefly tell us what is the impact of this law on businesses in Uganda, and how should the businesses navigate this challenge?
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me back here again this year. I was here last year, so it's exciting to be back. Now, first, I'm not a lawyer, so I will speak as a business owner here in agribusiness. Okay? Now, I am the president of the American Chamber of Commerce, so and I am an American. So I guess I got the toughest question, but I guess the most relevant as well. You know, any law that's passed, when you come in to do a business in a foreign country, any law that's passed, you have to navigate it. And I think, yes, we had early on disruptions. I know there's one company that does moringa powder, and he every year had a group of people who would come, maybe do internships, do tours, learn about his product. You know, as soon as that law and act was passed, he immediately lost that business. Those people will not come here. So that is very unfortunate, you know, that any law would immediately turn people away, especially when it disrupts business. Now, you know, is the U.S. going to give up on Uganda? Probably never, right? I mean, the U.S. already contributes $1 billion dollars of our tax revenue to support programs here. So I think, when it comes to U.S.-Uganda relations overall, I don't see too much disruption unless we get a certain Republican president, which I hope to God not. But as far as business, I think the disruption was a bit temporary. It honestly doesn't come up so much in conversations at all. I think there's nothing that legally binds me that says, I have to ask the gender preference of one of my employees. So you as lawyers tell me, I can hire anyone I want, right? There's no medical way for me to determine, a gender preference of someone. So, I think as businesses, we saw it maybe as a temporary disruption, but, as long as we stay true to the values within our business and we don't go against the law, then I see that this act, and when there was discussion last year regarding local content, it was also very disruptive for foreign investment. It basically said, we don't really want your foreign investment. We're going to only allow local ownership of certain contracts. So that was also a big disruption, but I think it kind of went away. Now, the World Bank taking a position, and I'm sure it wasn't just from this new act, I'm sure it was around other things as well, will also be very disruptive. Now, I can still benefit from World Bank money as a business, and I'm already, in discussions with World Bank because I think they signed about $100 million in loan opportunities for Ugandan private sector just this summer, or just, you guys don't call it summer, but just within these last few months. But so I can, as private sector, get loan money from World Bank. But if the infrastructure is going to be impacted, we already have terrible potholes. We already have high fuel prices. We already have power issues. And if Umeme's contract is up next year and the government takes that over, how can that potentially impact us? So I think, these other speakers really reminded me of a few things. Partnerships. If the new act really impacted me that badly, I can develop a partnership. I already have one with a Kenyan dried fruit processor. And, if he and I could partner and he could potentially sell my products because somebody doesn't want to work with Uganda, then that's something you look for. And, regarding digitalization too, I think when I was first asked to come speak about this, I was told the topic was going to be artificial intelligence, which it's absolutely not at all. But, the whole digitalization, COVID, we all learned immediately, about disruption. I was very fortunate. I came from a high technology background. And so when I saw the writing on the wall that we were going to be locked down, I immediately turned my business from an in-person business to an online business within 48 hours. And I never worked so hard in my life than those first 3 months of lockdown. And, I was actually able to triple our business in the COVID years. So disruptions, other people use the word challenges. I don't use the word challenge. I use the word opportunities, because a disruption is absolutely an opportunity for you to stop, assess, and look for other ways to do business. Partnerships, digitalization, even investors, they might be a little wary, but again, I'm going to stay true to my values as a business. I'm going to run my business ethically. I'm going to stay within the law. I'm going to pay my taxes. And people should still be willing to do that. And I'm going to show that I am looking towards the future, the growth, the African free continental trade. 1.4 billion people to 6 billion. Like you said, that's a lot of people to feed and clothe. So if you are not talking to your businesses and saying, what is your plan to grow into that? we're all doing each other a big disservice. It even made me stop and think, what the heck am I doing to be able to help feed, potentially 6 billion people? So I don't want us to look at one single act as, a huge disruption. Yes, we may differ on values around it. I differ on my fellow Republicans around abortion. I mean, we all have differing opinions about things, but it's how we come out of it that will prove to everyone how successful we really can be.
Wow, thank you. Well said.
Yeah, thank you, Meg. Tula, kindly confirm if you're still with us.
I am still here, thank you.
Okay. So, over to you, Tula. The previous panelists have talked about the African Continental Free Trade Area and how it's creating the world's largest trade area, bringing transformative change and opportunity for investment to African economies and businesses. As the head of competition and regulation at AB and David, Zambia, what does this mean for businesses, and how should businesses and leaders respond to it?
Thank you very much, Mama. Thank you very much to the Uganda Law Society for affording us the opportunity to be part of this panel. And riding on the presentations that have been made by David, Richard, and other speakers, just want to say that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area has come to stay, and it is very important for us to embrace it and use it to get to the Agenda 2063, which is the agenda to industrialize Africa through trade integration at the AU level. Now, coming to businesses, what is it that businesses should look out for? I think one of the notable and natural reaction by business to the AU is to lobby protectionist policies and strategies by their governments that may sort of shield them from increased competition that may come about arising from the regional integration that the AFCFTA comes up with. So unfortunately, disruptions are going to happen, as the previous speaker did hint that disruptions, and I think David and Richard also raised those issues, that disruptions to business are going to come up, and businesses ought to prepare to be competitive with or without competition. Now, increased regional trade means that countries which did not trade with particular countries are going to access those markets across the various regional economic communities that we have, such as SADC, COMESA, East Africa Community, the ECOWAS, WAEMU, and so forth. So these businesses need to prepare for this by also engaging into certain regional amalgamated institutions such as the COMESA Business Council, the East African Business Council, the ECOWAS Business Council, and through that sort of develop common approaches on how they are going to ensure that they benefit and not necessarily frustrate the competitiveness of the economies. For leaders, of course, leaders have done their part by furthering the protocols on investment and intellectual property rights, as well as competition policy at the AU level. And of course, it is very important that even as we drive these policies at leadership level, notably political level, of course, that we do not forget the average person on the ground, the traders who are trading on foot, on motorbike, on open vans across the borders, that it should come to be a reality for them, especially when it comes to non-tariff barriers, that it is very easy for leaders to talk about open borders based on the protocols that have been signed, but at the grassroots level, you find that there are a number of non-tariff barriers that may frustrate meaningful appreciation by society as to whether the AU protocol is really working for their advantage or not. For lawyers, again, I'll come and talk more on the other part. For lawyers, of course, it's a question of gathering knowledge. I know Uganda now has a competition law which was passed in the second quarter of this year by their parliament. We now have the Africa Continental Competition Policy Protocol, which also provides for mergers and acquisitions, abuse of dominance, vertical agreements, as well as merger and acquisition review at continental level. And for the lawyers, it's really a question of developing that capacity as advisors to businesses across the region, and also developing a practice that is of a Pan-African nature in order to ensure that where there are obstacles to trade in services, for instance, I think when you have a Pan-Africanist approach in your practice, you also benefit from the knowledge that other firms may have in other countries and particularly other regions. For now, that's what I would say about this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I think we are really pressed for time. Unless we have maybe one or two very burning questions from the audience, we could take that. I'm not sure whether we have any. Two questions. We'll take two at most for the panelists. I see there's one on this table.
Sorry, did you ask me a question?
Yes, we have a question.
Would you just repeat the question?
Just a minute. We are getting the microphone to be able to ask the question.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible. My name is Brian Collins Ochieng from ABN David, Uganda. And my question is to Thula. You talked about trade integration in Africa. And I really have a question on the risks of trade integration. We know that one of the incentives of globalization and trade liberalism was the ability of countries to leverage sort of specialization. If I'm so good at manufacturing a certain item, because I can trust in trade liberalism and my ability to trade with a neighboring country, I don't have to focus on producing wheat. If another country can do that, I can focus on, say, manufacturing or something else. But we've seen the risks that that has come with. We've seen EU dependence on Russia for Russian gas, and when the Russia-Ukraine war came and sanctions came in, EU countries began to struggle with the dependence they had on Russian gas. Even here in Africa, we struggled with food prices because of the prices of wheat going up, arising from the Ukraine crisis. So my question is, how best can we mitigate the risks that come with trade integration? Is it a necessary evil? Is it something we should live with? Because trade integration ultimately has advantages that outweigh those risks? Or, Thula, is there some thoughts you could share with us on how countries in Africa can mitigate the risks that come with trade integration? Thank you so much.
Okay, maybe we could also take the other question. If there's any other, then we ask the panelists to take them. If there is none, then Thula, please, maybe you could address that question.
Thank you very much. That's a very important question, and I think one of the things that are done before protocols are signed, before protocols are even adopted or ratified in various countries, is to discuss at national level the risks that the country will face with regard to entering into that protocol. You may be aware that at COMESA, SADC, and East Africa level, you had the tripartite free trade area, and about 4 or so countries are yet to sign that protocol in order for it to come into adoption phase. Ratified phase, because they have weighed the risk and seen that the chances of them mitigating that risk are very low, looking at their own economies. But having said that, again, I think specialization that you have spoken about is only workable to the point, of course, that you do not frustrate competition. Because if you specialize only in one thing and then something happens at global level, for instance, you are an oil producing country and something happens at global level affecting the prices, it means you are really going to be affected economically. And so whereas we specialization will be good to the extent that you have developed distinctive competence as a result of competitiveness, that is fine, but not as a result of protectionist measures, because recall that trade is made by, wealth is in any country is created by trading, and you trade with other countries. So you sell something to other countries also sell something to yourself. So it is a reciprocal kind of mechanism. So the way to reduce risk again is by having the legal profession also alert to regional integration legal frameworks. And now we are talking about the AU. We should be talking about an AU legal practice at the national level, that we develop that capacity to understand for our clients, even as we are advising them, what are the risks of going into the continent with regard to the protocol on investment, the protocol on intellectual property, the protocol on trade in goods, the protocol on trade in services, the protocol on competition policy now, understanding those so that we also, develop that capacity to be rounded advisors in that sense, that even when the clients are going out there, they also fully understand. Remember, governments do not trade with each other. It's businesses which trade with each other. And our link as lawyers also to the business community is quite close. And it is us who really need to pick up that mantle. If you look at most of the countries, most people dealing with trade law issues that are very conversant with that are economists. You have a lot of trade economists, but very few trade lawyers that you would find working in a law firm, probably in a consultancy or in government, but very few in a law firm. So that is an area that I think we would need to engage in order for us to assist mitigating risk for our clients. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. That was a very great question, and I think an equally great response. It must have addressed all your concern. And the audience, with that, this brings us to the end of this panel discussion. Please join me in thanking this very insightful panel of discussants. They've been a delight to work with. First of all, we also want to thank you for accepting our invitation. The audience has also been engaging. We also want to thank you, both online and the physical audience. Allow us now to wish you a nice evening and see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. I have an announcement here. There is a lost and found car key. Please contact Doreen of ULS at the registration desk. Anyone who could have a missing car key. Thank you.
We license, we regulate and supervise all schemes in this country that save members' funds for retirement.